Hey everyone, these two here are two of the updated 2020 Asus ZenBook lineups, the 14-inch ZenBook 14 UX425 and the smaller 13-inch ZenBook 13 UX325. I wanted to spend some time with them before sharing my thoughts with you, and I've been using 3 different units for the last few weeks, all early samples provided by Asus, but identical to the retail models you can already find in stores. The all-metal construction, the matte screen options, a large battery with USB-C charging, the Thunderbolt 3 support, the good inputs and the snappy daily use performance are what recommend these notebooks alongside their competitive pricing. At the same time though, they could have been sturdily made, and they are powered by Intel IceLake hardware and set to favor low noise and thermals over performance, thus they struggle with demanding tasks. AMD Ryzen variants will also be available in the next month, at least for the 14-inch model, and we'll talk about them in a future clip. Anyway, we'll get in depth on all these aspects in the video, but first please take a moment to hit the thumbs up button for the YouTube algorithm, it greatly helps our small channel. Thank you. Okay, so these two ZenBooks are identical in most ways, with the 13-inch model being roughly 15mm shorter, 4mm narrower, the same height and merely 60 grams lighter than the 14-inch variant. In fact, you can barely tell the size difference between them even when having them side by side, as you can see here. To put them in perspective, both are about the same size as my older generation Dell XPS 13 but lighter, and both are smaller and lighter than an Apple MacBook Pro 13, so they are perfectly suitable to grab along to school or work. They're also fairly well made, with an all-metal exterior casing that feels nice and premium to the touch. Asus offers them in two variants, a darker grey model with grey keys, the ones we have here, and a lighter variant called Lilac Mist. That's going to do a better job at hiding smudges, but I'd stay away from it because of its hard-to-read silver keyboard with white writing and illumination. However, these ZenBooks are not unibody designs, so I did notice some flex in the keyboard deck and some creaking sounds when grabbing this firmware and picking them up from the desk. Having used them for the last weeks, I don't think those creaking sounds would be a deal breaker for me, even if I would have preferred a tougher chassis, the kind offered by the previous ZenBooks and other available premium Ultrabooks, albeit most of them at higher cost. I'd also expect them to age well, since they meet a couple of mill-grade stress tests like most other Asus notebooks. I sure don't like these notebooks not having a headphone jack though. Asus ditched it, as they claim that more and more people use wireless headphones these days and the limited internal space left no room for the jack. That's bold on their part, but I don't use earbuds, so perhaps you can share your thoughts on this matter in the comment section down below, especially if you are an earbuds user. They do include an USB-C to 3.5mm adapter in the pack, so you can still use existing headphones, at least until you end up losing it. Still, if something had to be asked, I would have preferred a design without that HDMI port instead, since that's only HDMI 1.4b and can only output Full HD signal at 60 Hz. That means that you'll still end up using one of the USB-C ports with DisplayPort support if you plan to hook up a 4K screen at 60 Hz. For that matter, both USB-C slots on the left edge support Thunderbolt 3 with data, video and charging. This also includes a microSD card reader and a full-size USB-A on the right, although that's a slow Gen 1 variant, and these are complemented by fast wireless 6 and Bluetooth 5 connections. As for those practicality details that make a difference when using the laptop every day, Asus includes a combined IR and webcam combo at the top of the screen flanked by microphones, put fairly grippy rubber feet on the bottom of the laptop, where you'll also find the speaker cuts on the laterals, and they implemented smooth hinges that allow to pick up and adjust the screen with a single hand. The speakers are rather on the quiet side, with volumes of up to 72 dB on these samples on the music profile in Audio Wizard, but decent audio quality. At the same time, the screen doesn't lean back completely flat as on the ExpertBook lineup, the hinges are a bit weaker than I'd like, and those sharp interior edges still bite into the wrists. They do look cool and edgy, but a softer front lip is more comfortable with daily use. Now, before we move on, I should also mention this slightly tweaked thermal design here. The ZenBooks still implement Asus's ErgoLift hinge, which raises the main body on two small rubber feet at the bottom of the screen part for a slightly inclined typing position and improved airflow underneath. This design, however, puts the exhaust just under the screen, so the hot air is still blown into the display. Compared to the previous ZenBooks though, these 2020 models get a slightly thicker chin, and that puts the panel further away from the exhaust, allowing for that chin to take in most of the heat and keeping the panel within safe temperatures. This might seem like a small detail, but it's actually a major update that will prevent potential long-term display issues. Okay, with those out of the way, let's touch on the inputs. The typing experience is what primarily sets the 13-inch ZenBook UX325 apart from its 14-inch keen. And that's because the design did not leave room for the same full-size layout implemented on the UX425, but for one with shorter keys. While the UX425 gets the main set of 16 by 15mm keys, this only gets 16 by 13mm keys, which cramps up the layout and makes this more prone to mistypes. In fact, while the 14-inch model turned out to be one of my favorite Asus keyboards ever experienced, I could not reach the same speed and accuracy results in this 13-inch model, which felt more in line with the average Ultrabook. However, having not tested the UX425 side by side with this 13-inch model, I would have considered this to be a fine keyboard, and it still is one that those of you with smaller or averagely sized hands should get along alright with. The layouts are otherwise similar between the two, with flat directional keys and an extra column of function keys at the right, plus the power button incorporated as a key in the top right corner. These two keyboards are also backlit with bright white LEDs and a dedicated caps lock indicator. The illumination is slightly brighter on the 13-inch model, but not as uniform, at least not on this unit. Down beneath, centered on the chassis, Asus implement the same spacious black click pads with precision drivers on both of these laptops. They are smooth, reliable and sturdy surfaces with good gesture support and palm rejections. They also double as virtual number pads. However, there's no secondary screen pad offered for this series, unlike on the previous ZenBooks, and there's also no finger sensor, but you do get an IR camera at the top of the screen. Speaking of, Asus offers two screen options for both these lineups. They are all matte, non-touch IPS panels with Full HD resolution, but one is a standard option with around 300 nits of max brightness, and the other is this newer generation and more efficient 1W panel with 400 plus nits of brightness. Both our 13 and 14-inch models get the standard panels, but I'd expect most retail variants to ship with the 1W screen instead, which would make this more versatile in brighter light conditions and positively impact the battery life in a normal room. However, even these base panels are fine for everyday use, with almost 100% sRGB color coverage, wide viewing angles and slightly better brightness and contrast on the 13-inch variant. We did notice less light bleeding on the 14-inch model, although there's a fair bit of randomness in panel quality these days, so you should make sure to check for bleeding, dead pixels and any other issues on your units within the return windows. That aside, we haven't yet tested the 1W panel options, but we'll update in the written reviews on the sites once we do. They're the first links in the description. You should also check those articles for any updates on the overall performance and battery life findings, as what we're going to report here is based on early samples provided by Asus, and some aspects might change with future software updates. Hopefully I'll get to test some retail models as well, and we'll update the experience on the site if it changes significantly. I don't expect it will though. Okay, so we tested two versions of the ZenBook 14 UX425 and one of the ZenBook 13 UX325, all top configurations with the Intel Core i7-1065G7 processor and Intel Iris Pro graphics, 16GB of memory and a fast Samsung SSD. Everything is soldered on the motherboard with the exception of the single storage drive. Accessing the components requires removing the back panel, and be careful that there are two extra screws hidden behind the rear rubber feet. Inside you'll notice that the storage is placed right next to the CPU, but it has a thermal radiator on top that helps keep the temperatures at bay. The drive still reaches temperatures in the mid-50s with daily use and mid-60s with storage tests, but without any performance impact on our units. These two laptops are based on the same Intel IceLake hardware implemented by a multitude of other Ultrabooks these days. Both the i5 and the i7 models are 4-core and 8-thread processors, snappy in single-core tasks and averagely competent in multitasking, when allowed to run at higher TDP settings. By default, this is a 15W platform, but it can stably run at 25+W in some designs. Not in these ZenBooks though, as in these cases the power profiles are designed to favor low noise and reduced thermals, and not sustained performance. We ran a couple of different tests on the dynamic power profile available in the My Asus control app, and this is how these ZenBooks compare to a couple of other Ultrabooks we've tested lately, based on Intel IceLake and Comet Lake hardware, but also on the newer AMD Renoir platform, which is a significantly more competent option for multi-threaded loads. However, while these are pretty good benchmark results for an IceLake platform, these ZenBooks cannot sustain these scores in longer duration loads. With our Cinebench R15 stress test, the CPU stabilizes at 20+W, which still puts it in the bottom of the chart compared to some of the other Ultrabooks tested lately. Furthermore, it drops to 15+W with the more demanding Cinebench R20, and the performance is further limited with combined CPU and GPU loads, such as games, which you might want to run on the i7 configurations with the Iris Pro graphics. With a power limit of 15W for the entire CPU package and aggressive thermal limits, these platforms can barely cope with simpler or older titles such as Minecraft or Dota 2 or Bioshock Infinite, running at 30 plus frame rates on Full HD resolution and low graphics settings. In conclusion, expect a snappy everyday experience with these ZenBooks in everyday tasks such as browsing, office use, video and music streaming, light photo editing and the likes. But look elsewhere if you need something that can cope with demanding software and games. For that reason, my recommendation would primarily go to the Intel i5 configurations with the more basic graphics, as you'll hardly benefit from the Iris Pro iGPU here, at least based on our experience with these early samples. As mentioned already, the software is designed to minimize fan noise on these notebooks and not to favor performance. Asus went with a basic thermal design with a single fan and a heat pipe, and this mostly keeps the fan idle and completely silent with everyday use on battery, and barely active with heavier multitasking with the laptop plugged in on both the 13-inch and the 14-inch models. The laptop's exteriors run a bit warm in this case, but that's fine considering the mostly passive cooling. The fan remains quiet with gaming as well, at up to 40 dB at head level, and we measure temperatures in the mid-40s on the keyboard deck and high 40s on the bottom, but also high 40s on the screen's chin right next to the exhaust. The display itself rests in the mid to high 30s, which are safe temperatures. Now, you might have noticed already that a big chunk of the interior is reserved for the battery on these ZenBooks. This has put a 67 Wh battery inside both these lineups, significantly larger than what you'd normally get in these classes. We haven't tested the 1 watt screen options on any of these, which should help increase their runtimes, but with the standard panels we got about 5 to 6 hours of real-life multitasking, 7 to 8 hours of light office use, and 9 to 10 hours of Netflix and YouTube streaming. The laptops ship with a 65 watt charger that plugs in via USB-C. It's a single-piece design with a compact brick and a long and good quality cable, and a full charge takes about 2 hours. However, quick charging allows to fill up 60% of the battery in less than an hour. Okay, let's draw the line on these two. The squashed keyboard is what primarily sets this ZenBook 13 UX325 apart from the marginally larger 14-inch UX425 version. That's still fine for those of you with smaller hands, but the UX425 is a more reliable and more accurate typer. That aside, both these laptops are fairly well made and lightweight, offer good screen options, decent I/O, and larger batteries than most of the other options in their niches, with very few exceptions such as the LG Grams. They are also competitively priced, with both the 13-inch and 14-inch variants starting at around 1100 euros over here in Europe and under $1000 in the US. However, the 13-inch ZenBook seems to be more widespread and slightly more affordable as of right now, but if the two sizes are available for the same kind of money in your region, I'd surely opt for the UX425. At the same time, these struggle with demanding loads, so unless you plan to use them for everyday multitasking, browsing, office apps and video streaming, I'll look into something more powerful, perhaps one of those competent Ryzen 4000 notebooks out there, or even the beefier implementations of the Intel Core U hardware with NVIDIA MX250 and MX350 graphics. You'll find plenty of good options in stores, and we've covered many of those here on the channel and on the site. That mostly sums up our thoughts on this ZenBooks series. Thank you for watching, and I'd also love to hear your thoughts on these two. Are they a good buy, or would you rather go with an AMD Ryzen model instead? Also, what do you think about the lack of a headphone jack here? Is that a deal breaker, or is it something you could accept? Let's talk down below. Oh, and before you go, if you're still here at this point, make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already and subscribe for more of our content. Catch you in the next one.